Padre nuestro que estás en el cielo, santificado sea tu nombre.
Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, que ton nom soit sanctifié.
Vater unser im Himmel, geheiligt werde dein Name, dein Reich komme, dein
Tatu wetu tumjue, jina lako litumbe. Fikisha ubumfumbo bukutudi.
Onze Vader, die in de hemelen zijt, uw naam worden geheiligd. Uw koning.
Monya wang lido, koto kwana bregoi, ete tunolo biogoi, ete.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done.
So today we're starting something new. You might notice, if you've been here since the first year, a little bit of a theme. We began our year with 21 questions that we drew from John Wesley, who was the man who started the Methodist movement. There were 21 questions designed to give you a way to maybe get a more authentic faith, kind of going back to our roots as Methodists. And so now we're going to continue and go even further back and look at our roots as Christians through a prayer that Jesus taught his disciples to pray. And then here coming up soon, we're going to start to incorporate some of these tradition into what we do when we gather together on the first of the week to worship. So a little bit of old school brought into the new life. So we're going to start something around the Lord's Prayer. Maybe you've heard it called that. I think a better word for it or description is the disciples' prayer or the student's prayer, because this is what Jesus taught his 12 disciples one day when they came to him and they said, Jesus, will you please teach us how to pray? And so this is what he taught them. Now, here's what I know is I need this series, not because I don't know the Lord's Prayer or I haven't taught about it a long time. I need it to be reminded of some things. And I think you're going to need it as well, because we as humans, well, I'll just speak for myself. I don't presume any of you do things like me. I get in routines. And I get in ruts, and things become monotonous, whether it's just a regular daily task like brushing your teeth or even doing the Lord's Prayer. You know, we hear things or we say them regularly, and it just becomes rote. And we don't want that to be the case when it comes to this prayer. And I think you need this prayer because you need to understand a little bit more so that you can pray like you've never prayed before. You see, Jesus' disciples, before they asked him about this, they had seen Jesus and his life and the understanding that he had and the patience and the presence of God and all of these things, and they wanted that. They wanted to have a life like Jesus had, and what they understood and started to see is that there somehow was connected to Jesus' prayer life. Jesus would get away and he would pray. And there was something about him, and they wanted it, and so they said, Jesus, please teach us to pray, and this is what he taught them. Now, here's the thing, is Jesus, just so you know, in the Lord's Prayer, was not teaching his disciples just a checklist. Hey, just pray like this. Step 1, step 2, step 3. No, what he was really teaching us, and you're going to understand this over the next 6 weeks, is that there's a whole lot in here about who God is, what being a follower of Jesus is all about, and who God created you to be through this prayer. And my hope is that this prayer will start to have a rich, more meaningful presence in your life, because there's some high-octane stuff in here. There's some powerful stuff. So before we get a little further, in your program is a place to take some notes. I mention this almost every week, to not trust me on everything. I mean, you can trust me. I'm a trustworthy guy. But don't take my word for it all. Don't take any pastor's word for everything. You know, take some notes, use the back. There's a study guide. If you're online, you can even get it through our website. But wrestle with these things yourself. Get into God's word and kind of go along with what we're talking about here. You can find out so much more than I can give you in the 20 to 25 minutes or so that we have. So please do that. So back to the prayer. You see, Jesus taught his disciples to pray. And here's what you need to understand is, for 2,000 or so years, as people who follow Jesus come together, they have prayed this prayer. John Wesley, the man who started the Methodist movement, Martin Luther, St. Francis of Assisi, the Apostle Paul, the 12 disciples themselves prayed this prayer that we're going to pray. In fact, the earlier followers started to pray this prayer on a regular basis, 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night. And for over 2,000 years, all over the world, in all different languages and different settings, privately, in small groups, in large settings, followers of Jesus have come together to pray this prayer. Now, in the Holy Land, there is a chapel devoted to this prayer, and Pastor Aaron Brown was telling us about it in one of our meetings because he went there a couple years ago, and he was sharing a video. I'm going to share it with you here in a second, but he said it was one of the most incredible places just to simply go into, and it had the Lord's Prayer written out in all of these different languages. It's a place called the Pater Noster, Our Father. So about 30 seconds, just kind of get a glimpse of that.
This is the Church of the Pater Noster, the Our Father. It's the Lord's Prayer, many different languages.
I didn't ask him, but my assumption is the voice in the background is probably praying that prayer in a different language. It is an incredible place. This little prayer is rich with meaning and depth and power. And so starting today, I want us to be able to tap into that and understanding it a little bit more. And so what I want us to do before we go any further is I want us to say the Lord's Prayer together. But before you do, I want to do it out loud. I just want to give you some notes or some help. If you're new to church, there's some unwritten rules when it comes to reading things out loud in church. So I'm going to help you out. You might write these down. These will be good for you. The first unwritten rule is this. When you do it, read in an expressionless monotone voice without any hint of emotion. Okay? That's one of the things. Number two, keep your mind vacant. Don't you dare think about the words you're actually saying. That's an unwritten rule when it comes to doing stuff out loud in church. The third one is the most important. Whatever you do, do not be the first person to start talking, just in case everybody else stops. And then you're public speaking, right? That's the way it was in my church growing up. Anytime we did something out loud together, it was just kind of this monotone, rote sort of thing. But we can do better than that, right? Oh, my. You can do better than this. I know you can. And so here's what I want you to do. I want you to stand if you're able, and the words will be up here behind me. Let's stand together, and let's pray this prayer that Jesus taught us to pray. And maybe think about the words as you say them. Let's begin. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. Now have a seat, and as you're doing that, turn to somebody and say, you prayed really good. Come on, there you go. See, a little up, a little down. This prayer, I think, if you really stick with this, a few things are going to happen. Well, a couple reasons why we're really kind of getting into this. One is to help you be a better prayer. People often ask me, how do you pray? And yes, the Lord's Prayer can kind of help you. I told you it's not a list, but it kind of is. It kind of helps. It'll help you pray a little bit better. But also because when you start to really get into this, it'll teach you more about the depths of who God is, which will hopefully inspire you to pray more. I believe that if you make this a part of your daily life over the next 6 weeks, you're going to pray differently than you do right now. And when you do that, you're going to know God better than you do right now. You're going to know yourself better than you do right now. You really will. So that's my hope. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to start at the very beginning and just kind of break down just that first phrase. And as we do, I want you to just pay attention to a few things that it's starting to help us understand about God. And I call it who, where, and what. So the first thing is this. It's helping us understand who God is. Who is this God that we're praying to? Is he angry? Is he disappointed? Is he apathetic? Does he really care? So who is this God? it's going to help us understand where is God? Where is this God that we're trying to connect to? Is he far away? Is he close? Where is God? And then what kind of heart and attitude should we bring to our prayers? We're going to understand that in this first line. Who, where, and what? So first, the who. Who do we pray to? And Jesus begins this prayer with the words, Our Father. We just said it together. And this is a very important way to just start this off. I want to tell you why. Jesus is pointing out from the very beginning, his disciples say, Jesus, tell us how to pray. And he says, when you pray, start like this, Our Father. And the word he uses there for father, if you're a church person, you may have heard it before. It's an Aramaic word called Abba. No, not the disco band from the 70s, spelled the same way. But it's Abba, which is not just a word for father. It's a more intimate word. It's a word more like daddy. And when we think of daddy, we often think that, it's a child's word that they use. But no, in the context of this, it's not just a child's word. It's an adult word. It implies something not formal with a relationship with your father. It's more like a dad. It's this idea that the God that created it all is somebody that you can be close to. Now, in my life, there's only a few people that call me dad. And that single word gets my attention every single time. When my kids were little, and we'd be like in a room with a bunch of kids, and you could hear kids going, Dad or Dad. You know what? I knew how to tune them all out, but when my kids said it, I was in sync, right? There was something about their frequency that they got my attention, and it created this closeness and this bond. When I hear the word dad, it establishes something that is stronger than steel with my kids. And I hope we understand that when it comes to calling God Dad or Abba. There's a closeness that Jesus wants us to establish with God. And so when Jesus tells us to address God as Dad, he's telling us that God is a personal being. He is somebody that cares. He's not some impersonal, apathetic deity that's out there that started it all and has just ignored us. No, God created us because he has this desire to give his love away. He's created us to be a recipient of that love, but then also to share it with other people. Tammy and I, between the two of us, we got 6 kids, and man, we love our kids, and we would do anything. We would die for our kids. But I got to tell you, that connection and that closeness, while it is great, it also hurts sometimes, right? Parents know this. Kids know this. That closeness is filled with joy and sometimes heartache. But here's the thing that I know about me as a father is regardless of if it's a time of heartache, I want to offer them everything I can. I want to love them and never push them away. And so I think that's the way God is. Our Abba, our Father. God created us to receive his love and to give his love out. And I think this prayer begins this way with our Father to help us reflect back and understand that connection. Now here's the thing. I'm just going to admit right off the bat that anytime I talk about dads in church or any setting, and especially in this kind of close, loving sort of thing, I just have to acknowledge that for some people that is so foreign and so nothing that they ever were raised with. Like me and my dad, we love each other, but I never was raised to be close or affectionate or anything like that. But then there's others who maybe weren't even raised by dad at all. Maybe their dad left, or maybe their dad was abusive. And so when we talk in the church about God being our Father and this Abba and this Dad, the idea just brings back ideas or remembrance of pain or being let down. But listen, that's not God's desire for you to know him that way. And my hope is that regardless of what father figure you've had in your life or done, that you come to experience this Abba that Jesus talks about. He truly is a dad in the best possible way. Now, he goes on, it's our Father. I want you to pay real attention to the word our. That's the very beginning. Nowhere in this prayer does Jesus say, my Father, I, mine. Now, when you use this prayer, it is good to personalize it, but Jesus says it's our Father. And this is to remind us right off the bat that God is the dad to all people. Everybody who prays this prayer, everyone who prays it is your sibling in God. Did you know that? Yeah. The people that are like you, the people you like, and the people you don't. When they pray this prayer, they are your sibling. Yeah. When those liberal Christians that make your skin crawl pray this, they are your siblings. When those conservative Christians irritate the heck out of you, they pray this, guess what? They are your siblings. Democrat, Republican, they are your siblings. Yeah. Catholics, Pentecostals, Episcopalians, everybody who prays this prayer, even the people who are the fans of Tom Brady and the New England Patriots, or the Rams, when they pray this prayer, we are reminded they are our brother and sister. And as difficult and irritating as some of them can be, or that you can be, our Father means that Christianity is not just about us, meaning you. It is not an individual thing. It is about all people. It's like being in a team sport. We are family. God is dad to people who know him and listen to him. God is even dad to those who reject him. He is our Father. And then it continues on. It says, our Father in heaven. And so when we think about heaven, it makes me wonder, ask questions. Maybe you've thought about this. How far away is heaven? Where is heaven? I mean, is it past the moon? Is it beyond that? Is it someplace around? Where is it? Is it a distance? And here's the thing, is sometimes we have a hard time understanding heaven. And one of these days I'll talk more about heaven. But we kind of get this idea that heaven is just this place way far away. And if God is in heaven, then God is way far away. And if God is way far away, then he doesn't care so much. He is distant. He is unapproachable. But listen, that's not what this is saying in this. God is in the heavens. Sometimes we come to church and we say it innocently enough. Even pastors and worship leaders, we do it. We'll say something like, God, today, as we come into your presence, will you whatever? Because sometimes we think beyond the heavens, maybe God is in the church. And I think when God hears us say that, I think he kind of snickers at us and goes, bless your heart. Where do you think I've been all this time? You see, God is not just there. He's not just here. Now, the word heaven in this prayer is actually, when you get it down into it more, it's a little translated not quite right, depending on your version of the Bible. It should be translated more literally to be this: our Father, the one in the heavens. It's a plural word. And the word for heavens in the New Testament, it has a few different meanings. It's a word that they used when they talk about the solar system and the cosmos and out there in the universe. It's also a word that they use to describe the atmosphere and the clouds and the sky. At times in the scriptures, it's a word that describes the air, literally, that you breathe. The God in the heavens, the one there, the one here. The one who is so close you can breathe him in. So when you say, our Father, the one in the heavens, you're not saying, our Father from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Shout out to some of you Star Wars fans. No, you are literally saying when you pray this, our Father who is all around me. Our Father who is closer than the air that I breathe. Our Father who is right here, right now, as well as in the vastness of the universe. God isn't just way out there. He is here. And because God is so close, it's a reminder to you that you are never, ever alone. Our Father in the heavens. Now, I heard this story from another pastor once. He shared it with me, and it's about a man and his daughter. And this daughter came to a pastor and said, Pastor, I'd like for you to go visit my father. He's dying. He's at the end of his life. And so the pastor went and found the man laying in his bed, propped up on a few pillows. And right there next to his bed was a chair. And the pastor just assumed that the man knew he was coming and said, I guess you were expecting me. And the man's like, no, I don't even know who you are. So he explained, well, I'm the new pastor at your church. And your daughter asked me to come and see you, and I just saw the chair. I just assumed you knew I was coming. And the man started to explain, the chair, yeah, there's a story. In fact, I've never really told anybody this. I haven't even told my daughter. He says, but all my life, this is the older man telling the pastor, all my life I've had a difficult time praying. It just doesn't make sense. It goes over my head. It just doesn't feel right. And at church, I'd hear the pastor get up there and pray, and I just didn't connect. And so I stopped trying to pray altogether until one day he explained about 4 years earlier, one of his best friends said, Joe, prayer is simple. It is just a matter of having a conversation with Jesus. And so he gave him a suggestion. If you can't imagine that, do this. Sit down in a chair and then have an empty chair right there next to you and imagine that he is sitting there and you're just having this conversation back and forth. He warned him. He said, now listen, it might feel a little bit weird at first, but listen, it's not spooky. Jesus promised that he will always be there. And so he started to do that and just set up a chair and would talk to Jesus. He said he tried it. He liked it so much that he actually started doing it a couple times a day. He said he was careful, though. He wouldn't let his daughter see him do it because he didn't want his daughter to think that he was losing his marbles and talking to nobody and put him in an old folks' home, But that's what he did. And the pastor was really moved by it because, here was this guy like teaching the pastor something, because, by the way, we're clueless. So he left. He learned something new. And a couple days later, he got a call from the daughter to let him know that the father had died. And she says, here's the thing, Pastor. I left the house around 2 o'clock. She went to go see her dad and called over to her bedside. The dad told her that he loved her, told her a dad joke, corny joke, kissed her on the cheek. And then she left to go to the store. She said when she came back, he was already dead, and she found him. But the interesting thing was this. When she found him, apparently just before he died, he leaned over and he rested his head on that empty chair right by the bed. I don't know if that story is true, but I think there's something powerful in it. I think the man in that story is onto something real. That this praying to a Father who is all around you is closer than the air that you breathe. Well, before Jesus taught this prayer, in the book of Psalms, one of the writers, he said this about God. He says, where can I go from your spirit? And where can I flee from your presence? He says, if I go up to the heavens, then you are there. And if I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, and if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there, your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. So heaven's not just some faraway place. It's here. And it's now. I want to wrap up with the next part. Our Father, or our Dad, who is closer than the air we breathe. And it says, hallowed be thy name. I want to ask you, how many of you used the word hallowed this week? Come on. Man, you use that in like work conversation. You're going to seem like the smartest guy in the room. Or lady. Maybe not. Here's the thing. We don't understand hallowed so much, so let's break that down. Before we do, I want you to know this about a name. In the Bible, and not just in the Bible in those days, but even in Native American culture and other cultures, names were significant, and they carried weight, and they carried meaning. People were often named after something that was very significant in that time, or something that kind of described their character. So names had weight. My name, for instance, I looked it up. My name is Benjamin. And it's a Hebrew word that literally means the son of my right hand. It was often given to the youngest son in the family, which I am, but wait, I'm the only son. At any rate, but it's the son of my right hand. And so I thought that was interesting. And so I thought I'd look up my other names. And my middle name is Crawford. And yes, there you go. You can make fun of me like all the junior high kids did with that name. But I looked up the word Crawford, and it is Scottish, Irish, or English. They can't tell, basically from that island over there. And it is a word that means a place where the crow is at the ford. And a ford, just so you know, in that terminology, is a place where a creek or a river goes through, and it's shallow enough that you can cross it. So my last name, Bainbridge, is also another Scottish, Irish, English, we don't know which one, word that is actually a reference to an area, actually in England, where there is a bridge that crosses over the River Bain. So I'm like, what does my name mean? Well, it means the youngest son who can't make up his mind as to whether he needs to cross the river through it where it's shallow or just use the bridge right down the road. That's the best, in our times, a lot of times our names really don't have as much weight as they used to. Sometimes they do. By the way, I'm named after my grandfather, so I love that about my name. But here's what I've realized in the last decade or more, and this is a truth that I live by. In your life, you only own two things: your name and your word. That's what I've understood. Because here's what happens is as you live through life and your word all of a sudden becomes no good, you know what happens to your name? It becomes no good as well. And once your name is no good, it doesn't matter what you do or what you say, your word is no good. Your name carries a lot of weight. And so when we talk about the name of God and how do you hallow it, we got to understand that it carries a lot of weight. Jesus said, "Hallowed be your name." Now again, we don't use this word hallow a lot, but it implies this. It's a word that means to give something the appropriate value that it deserves. To honor something, here a little definition. To hallow means to recognize something's worth, to treat it with reverence and with holiness. To hallow something means to set it apart as something that's extraordinary. So there's a tension right from the start in this prayer that we live in as Christians. By the way, if you follow Jesus, you should probably have tension throughout your whole life, at least one point or another. You see, in this prayer, on one hand, Jesus is saying, God is Abba. He is Dad. He is close, he is caring, he is personal, he is tender. And then on the other hand, he tells us to hallow, to revere, to show that God's name is full of power and it's holy and it's just. And if we're too casual with God and we forget the power and his majesty, then sometimes we forget that God is holy. See, there's a tension between being very close and personal and yet at the same time very reverent. We're to hold these things in tension. But sometimes we forget to keep God's name holy. How? In the Ten Commandments and the Big Ten, as I call them, God tells us to not use his name in vain. And sometimes we wonder what that is all about. What does that mean? And there's some little ways we do that. And like one, for instance, I'm going to get on my soapbox real quick. This is my own little pet peeve. OMG. Oh my God. We're not trying to take God's name in vain most of the time, but what that does is it trivializes and it uses his name so casually and flippantly that in a way it's not hallowing his name. It's a mild way to use God's name in vain. And of course, there are some not so mild ways to use his name in vain when we're really angry or we really want to shock somebody. Man, we can do it. To hallow God's name means that when we say it, it should have something to do with his character and his nature. We shouldn't just toss it around when we're happy or we're surprised. No, it should be something that's serious to us. And when we hallow God's name, it's not just the way we talk, it's how we live our lives. So my name is Benjamin Bainbridge, and I'm named after my grandfather, and my son is named Benjamin. And I found out something interesting about names a few years ago at the Joplin campus on a beautiful summer day. I'll just confess, I got pulled over for speeding leaving church. It was beautiful. It's 35 miles an hour down this road, which makes no sense. It wasn't like I was trying to. I just wasn't paying attention. And next thing you know, the beautiful lights are in the back. I could see them, and I pull over. The officer comes to me. He says, "Do you know how fast you were going?" I said, "No, I was on the phone. I wasn't paying any attention." He didn't think that was funny. He gave me a ticket. Here's what I didn't realize. That 4 weeks later, a nice person at the church would say, "Well, Pastor Ben, it was great to see your name in the paper." And I thought, I must have done something great. My name is in the paper. No, they put tickets in the paper. Why do they put names of people who have done things in the paper? The only thing I can figure out is there's a lot of nosy people out there, right? And so I was like, oh, yes, this is what I did. And we laughed about it. And then about a month or so later, he comes back. He goes, well, Pastor Ben, I saw your name in the paper again. I'm like, no, you did not. And so as I start to investigate, I found out my son got a speeding ticket. But everybody else thought it was me. The way we live, when we go by God's name, should also hallow it. I try to live every day in such a way that my actions and my life would bring honor to God's name, but the truth is sometimes I don't. And sometimes I mess up. And my actions don't coincide with his names. And sometimes what I say doesn't reflect who God is to a watching world. A few years ago, it became evident to me when this happened at something we call annual conference in the Methodist Church. Every summer, all the pastors in the state of Missouri and a bunch of lay leaders, we get together in Springfield for the week or for a weekend, and we have conferences. And I kind of have this spiritual gift when I get in a group of people, especially pastors, that just like blossoms out of me. And it's my gift of sarcasm. And I don't know what it is about a group of pastors. I like to push their buttons. I like to poke them a little bit. I don't know. I blame that on my dad. He's the one that gave it to me. But what I noticed all of a sudden one day is that's kind of poking just to poke. And I got the reaction that I wanted, and I liked the reaction. So you know what I did? I poked some more. And then I poked some more. And it took me a while to realize that it wasn't so much fun for them. Here I am, a pastor, claiming God's name with a bunch of people that claim to live and have God's name, and I am making fun of them and the way they do their job. I had to apologize. I didn't apologize because I think God would disown me for it. I had to apologize because I realized I want to live up to the name of this Father who loves me, who is there for me. Hallowed be your name. So that's just the beginning of this prayer. Actually, I want to invite Nate up to kind of close us with a song. I put you on the spot. He says, I want him to come up and prepare himself for a song that we're going to close with. But just remember, this prayer, the beginning of it, our dad, who loves us so much, who is close, who is all around us, closer than the air that we breathe, whose name and character we want to revere and to make holy with our words and our lives. That's where we leave it today. We're going to pick this up over the next 5 weeks and go deeper into this prayer that I hope you stick with me. And not just here, maybe if you can't make it here, maybe online and watch it. Because I truly believe that if you make this prayer your own, it'll change your life. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Let's pray together.